I need to say this first, that this isn't my story, but the man who told it to me discovered his wife's affair in the worst possible way. He found the other man, and what he did next was disturbing. He told me because he made a choice that night, and because no one ever asked him about it. I found him by accident. That's the part people always expect to be a lie, but it isn't. I wasn't looking for him. I wasn't following anyone. I wasn't angry driving or replaying arguments in my head. I was just taking a longer way home, trying to avoid going back to a house that felt quieter than it should have. It was late, dusk tipping into night, one of those stretches of road that never feels fully public or fully empty. I saw the car first, off the road, nose down, one headlight still on, cutting through weeds and dirt at the wrong angle. At first I thought it was abandoned. Then I heard him. Not yelling, not screaming, just calling out, weak, strained. I pulled over without thinking, left my door open, walked toward the sound, with my phone already in my hand, thumb hovering over the screen. He was trapped, driver's side crushed inward, leg pinned, blood where it shouldn't have been. The kind of injuries that don't look dramatic at first, but your body knows are bad. He saw me. Relief crossed his face so fast it almost hurt to watch. "Hey," he said. "Hey, thank God, can you?" Then he really looked at me, and everything changed. I saw it in his eyes before he said anything. That flicker of recognition, the calculation, the sudden fear that had nothing to do with the car. He knew who I was. I knew who he was too, not from a single moment, from dozens of small ones, from patterns, from late nights, from lies that didn't quite line up. I'd never confronted him, never even spoken to him before, but I knew his face. My wife's phone had shown it to me without meaning to, reflected in glass. In photos she thought I wouldn't look at closely. In smiles she didn't use any more at home. He said my name, quietly, like he was testing it. "Please," he said right after. "Please, my phone's dead. I can't move. Just call someone." I stood there. And I want to be very clear about this part. I wasn't frozen. I wasn't in shock. I wasn't overwhelmed. I understood exactly what was happening. I understood the injuries, understood the time of day, understood how long it would take for someone else to come down that road. I also understood what this moment meant. If I called for help, he'd live. Maybe not easily, maybe not cleanly, but he'd live. And if I didn't, no one would ever connect me to this. It wouldn't be murder, it would be an accident, a delay, a missed opportunity. He saw the hesitation. That's when he started begging, not dramatically, not sobbing, just desperate. "Listen," he said, "I know this looks bad. I know who you think I am. But I swear I was going to end it. I was on my way to tell her." I didn't respond. I didn't need explanations. He tried again. "My kids," he said. "I have kids, please." That landed somewhere in my chest and stayed there. I thought of my own house, my own kids asleep, my wife who had been distant for so long. I'd started questioning my own memory of her. I thought about how small this road was, how quiet, how no one would know I'd even been here. I took a step closer. He relaxed a little when I did, mistook it for help. "Thank you," he whispered. Just call, please." I looked down at my phone, battery full, signal strong. Then I did something worse than violence. I put the phone back in my pocket. I stepped back. He noticed immediately. "No," he said. "No, wait, what are you doing?" I didn't answer. I didn't threaten him. I didn't say a word about my wife. I didn't accuse him of anything. I just stopped participating. He started crying then, not loud, just the sound of someone realizing the rules had changed. "You don't have to do this," he said. "You're not like that." That sentence almost broke me, because he didn't know me at all. He only knew the version of my life that existed without consequences. I turned away. I walked back toward my car. Behind me, his voice cracked. "I'll tell her everything," he said. "I swear, just don't leave me here." I paused. I won't lie about that. I stood there for a moment longer than I should have. Then I got in my car. I drove away. I didn't speed. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back in the mirror. I just left. The news reported it the next day. Single vehicle accident. Driver succumbed to injuries. Timeline unclear. They estimated he'd been alive for a while after the crash. No mention of witnesses. No mention of help delayed. Nothing that pointed to me. My wife found out that night. She collapsed when she heard his name. Cried harder than I'd seen her cry in years. I held her. That part is hard to admit. I held her while she cried for him. I listened to her tell a version of their story, where she was confused, where it just happened, where nothing was intentional. I never corrected her. No one ever questioned me. No one ever asked where I was that evening. I told myself over and over that I hadn't killed anyone. And that's technically true. I didn't cause the crash. I didn't touch him. I didn't push him. I just didn't help. And here's the part he told me last. The part that still sits wrong. He said the guilt didn't come from what he did. It came from how calm he felt while doing it. From how easy it was to stand there and decide someone's fate by doing nothing at all. Because once you realise how thin that line is, you start wondering how many other moments in your life were choices you just didn't name, and how many people walk away every day knowing exactly what they're leaving behind. I thought my marriage was ending. That's what I believed at first. Not explosively, not dramatically, just eroding. Long silences, tension that never quite broke into arguments. Two people learning how to move around each other without touching. I assumed divorce was where it was headed. I was wrong. The first sign wasn't a fight. It was how calm she became during them. Whenever we disagreed, she stopped interrupting me, stopped defending herself. She'd sit there quietly and say things like, "Go on," or "Tell me how you really feel." At first I appreciated it. I thought she was trying. I didn't realise she was collecting. She started writing things down, not obviously, not right in front of me, just later. I'd notice a notebook on the counter, or her phone open when I walked into a room, screen locking too quickly. She started asking questions in the middle of arguments, specific ones. "Why does this make you so angry? Do you feel out of control right now? Are you saying you could hurt someone when you're like this?" I'd stop and say, "What? No." She'd nod, calm, reassuring. "I just want to understand you better." I didn't see the trap. I raised my voice once. It was stupid. Frustration boiled over. Nothing violent, nothing threatening. Just a moment I didn't handle well. She didn't react. She just looked at me and said softly, "That's what I'm talking about." After that, people started treating me differently. Friends checked in, but not the way they used to. Not casual, concerned. Family members asked how she was holding up. I remember thinking, why does everyone suddenly think something's wrong with me? Then I heard her on the phone one night. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was walking past the room when she said my name. "I'm not saying he's dangerous," she said. "I'm just saying I'm worried. He's not himself lately." I stood there frozen. She kept going. "I don't want to make a big deal out of it. I just want to be prepared in case things escalate." Escalate. That word stuck with me. Because nothing had escalated, except the story. I started noticing patterns. She'd provoke me gently, bring up old arguments, push the same buttons over and over, then go quiet the second I reacted. That's when the phone would come out. Not openly, just enough to capture tone, timing, contextless sound bites. I found the notes by accident, a folder on her laptop, open, unprotected, dates, times, short descriptions, raised voice, angry pacing, unpredictable mood. No mention of what led up to it, no mention of her involvement, just moments, cut loose from their causes. I sat there reading it, feeling something shift permanently. She wasn't lying, she was editing. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about divorce. This was about building a version of me that could be acted against. A version that justified fear. A version that explained future decisions. If she left, she wanted to leave clean. If she stayed, she wanted leverage. And if something happened, she wanted witnesses ready. I didn't confront her. That would have been exactly what she wanted. Instead, I stopped reacting, stopped arguing, stopped explaining myself. Every time she tried to pull me into an emotional exchange, I disengaged. She noticed immediately. "You're being distant," she said. "I'm tired," I said. I started documenting quietly. Not her behaviour, mine. Where I was, who I spoke to, how I handled conflict. I told 2 people I trusted exactly what was happening. Not dramatically, just factually. I spoke to a lawyer before she ever knew I was thinking about it. And when I left, I didn't make it an event. No fight, no accusation, no final argument. I packed while she was out, left a note that said I needed space and would communicate through counsel. The story she was building collapsed without its main character. There was no outburst to point to, no incident to finalise the narrative, just absence. That's what saved me. Distance, time, the fact that I realised what was happening before she finished writing the ending. I'm out now, cleanly, no restraining orders, no court battles, no dramatic fallout. From the outside it looks like a marriage that simply didn't work, but I know better. Because once you see how easily someone can build a version of you, you learn that survival sometimes has nothing to do with proving the truth, and everything to do with stepping out of the story before it's finished being told. This isn't my story. A woman told it to me the way you hand someone a sealed envelope, like you're not asking for comfort, you're asking for a witness. She didn't cry. She didn't dramatise it. She just laid the facts out in order and said she needed somebody else to hold them. I'm going to tell it through her eyes, the way she lived it, because the most frightening part of her story isn't what happened. It's what she was trying to prevent from being explained away. I wrote the post before anything happened. That's what people don't understand. They read a title like that. If I'm not here anymore, look at my husband. And they assume I was spiralling, that I was being dramatic, that I was threatening something. But I wasn't writing it like a cry for help. I was writing it like a record, a contingency, because I realised something simple and terrible. If you die unexpectedly, everyone becomes an expert on your emotions. People start rewriting you. They decide you were depressed. They decide you were unstable. They decide you were careless. They decide you must have been going through something. And if someone wants to hurt you quietly, that's exactly what they rely on. So I wrote the post while I was still alive and clear-headed. And I wrote it with one goal. If I disappeared, nobody would get to invent me afterward. I wasn't suicidal. I didn't self-harm. I wasn't abusing substances. I wasn't having an affair. I wasn't planning to run away and start over. I wasn't even particularly impulsive. I had anxiety sometimes, sure. Everyone does. But nothing clinical. Nothing that would explain me vanishing or dying by accident. I want that understood, because that's how stories get bent later. Someone will say she was stressed. Someone will say she was overwhelmed. Someone will say maybe she did it to herself. No, that's why the post existed. From the outside, my marriage looked normal. Better than normal, actually. My husband was the type of man people liked immediately. Calm, helpful. The guy who always offered to carry something heavy. Always remembered birthdays. Always smiled at neighbours. He spoke gently. Never raised his voice in public. Never seemed angry. When people met him, they'd say things like, "You're lucky." And I used to agree. We didn't fight loudly. We didn't throw things. We didn't have the kind of arguments you see in movies. If anything, we were quiet, routine, stable. That's why it took me so long to notice the pattern. Because nothing about him screamed danger. It whispered. The first time I felt it, I couldn't even name it. We were in the kitchen. I was rinsing dishes. He was behind me, arms around my waist, chin on my shoulder. A normal moment. Then he said softly, like he was joking, "You know, if something ever happened to you, I don't know what I'd do." It sounded sweet on the surface, the kind of thing a loving husband might say, but something about the phrasing made my skin tighten. Not because of the words, but because of the tone. He said it the way people say things they've already imagined. I laughed it off. I leaned into him. I said something like, "Nothing's going to happen." He kissed my cheek. And then almost casually he added, "You're forgetful lately." I frowned. "What?" He shrugged. "Just noticing little things. You've been tired." I wasn't tired, not more than usual, but he said it like a diagnosis. And the next day, he said it again. This time on the phone with his sister, while I was in the room. "She's been a little forgetful," he told her. "I'm just keeping an eye on her." I remember freezing with my coffee cup in my hand. Keeping an eye on me? Why would anyone need to keep an eye on their spouse? When I asked him later, he smiled and said, "I didn't mean anything by it. I just care." And that should have made me feel loved. But it didn't. It made me feel watched. After that, little comments started stacking up. Always framed as concern, always delivered gently. "You've seemed stressed. You didn't sleep well. You've been snappy lately. You don't remember saying that?" He started doing it around other people more often, like it was casual conversation. At dinner with friends, he'd laugh and say, "She's been so scatterbrained." If I corrected him, he'd tilt his head and say, "See, like that?" You get defensive. And suddenly I wasn't just disagreeing, I was proving his point. That's how it works. Not by calling you crazy, by making your normal reaction look like evidence. I started keeping track. Not because I wanted to accuse him, because I wanted to make sure I wasn't imagining it. I wrote down dates, times, exact words. I noted who was in the room when he said them. I hated myself for doing it at first. It felt paranoid. But the notes did something important. They showed me escalation, not in volume, in frequency. He was doing it more. And he was doing it strategically, when other people could hear. Then the accidents started happening. Small plausible things. My medication bottle was on the wrong shelf one morning. Not the biggest deal, except I don't move it, and neither does he. He said, "Maybe you did it and forgot." We were on the stairs once and I slipped slightly, just a stumble, and he caught me. Steady hands, calm face. But afterward he said, to no one in particular, "You've been unsteady lately." Unsteady? I hadn't fallen. I hadn't even come close. He turned my normal human misstep into a pattern, and then he started recommending solutions. Maybe you should talk to someone. Maybe you should rest more. Maybe we should adjust your meds. I don't know how to explain the feeling of being managed, like my husband had turned into someone overseeing a project called me. I started noticing how he spoke about me when he thought I couldn't hear, on the phone, in another room, always the same tone, gentle, concerned, reasonable. "I'm just worried," he'd say. "She's not herself lately." I'm trying to be patient, like I was an illness. Friends began checking in on me in odd ways. They'd ask, "Are you okay?" But not like a friend asking casually, more like someone verifying a rumour. My mother asked me once, "Sweetheart, are you taking care of yourself?" I asked her why she said that. She hesitated, then admitted my husband had called her out of concern. That's when something in me went cold, because he wasn't just shaping my image in our home. He was shaping it in the world. He was building context so that if something happened, nobody would be surprised. They'd say we were all worried about her anyway. The moment I knew the post was necessary wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. It was a morning where I woke up and found my front door unlocked. I always lock it, always. My stomach dropped immediately. I checked the deadbolt. It hadn't been forced. It was simply unlocked. When I asked him, he didn't react, didn't frown, didn't look alarmed. He just said, "You probably forgot." I stared at him. I didn't. He smiled gently, the same smile he used when he wanted to sound reasonable. "Babe," he said, "this is what I mean. You're under a lot of stress." Stress. He said it like it explained everything, and then he did something I'll never forget. He reached out and touched my shoulder, comforting, soft, and he said, "It's okay, I'm here." It should have calmed me. Instead, it made me feel like I was standing on the edge of something, because if he was the one unlocking the door, then he was also the one reassuring me about it. He was creating problems and then playing hero. And if he could do that with a lock, he could do it with bigger things. That afternoon, I opened my laptop and started writing the post. I didn't write it like a rant. I wrote it like a report. I included dates. I included patterns. I included exact phrases. I wrote, "I am not suicidal. I am not abusing drugs or alcohol. I have not expressed intent to harm myself. If something happens to me, please look at my husband's behaviour leading up to it." Then I listed the strange comments. The way he'd started calling me forgetful. The way he'd told others I was not myself. The way minor incidents were turned into character traits. The way he stayed too calm when I was frightened. I wrote it without emotion because I didn't want anyone to dismiss it as hysteria. That was the whole point. I wanted strangers to read it and think, this is someone paying attention, not someone spiralling. Before I posted, I stared at the screen for a long time, because posting it felt like lighting a match in a room full of gas. If he found it, I didn't know what he'd do, but I also knew the alternative. If I didn't post it, and something happened, then everything he'd been building would work. So I posted it. Quietly, no announcement, no drama. Just a thread and a place where people archive things without knowing they're doing it. And then I lived normally. I smiled. I went to work. I answered texts. I went to dinner with him and nodded at the right times. But inside, I changed. I stopped taking food or drink from him if I hadn't watched it made. I stored my medication separately. I told one friend subtly where the post was and what it was called. Not because I wanted to ruin him, because I wanted someone to be able to say later, "She told me she wasn't suicidal. She wrote it down." The days after I posted, he didn't mention it. If he'd seen it, he didn't let me know. But something shifted. He became sweeter, more attentive, more gentle, like he was trying to smooth something over. And that made me feel worse because it meant one of two things. Either he had no idea what I'd done, or he did, and he was adjusting. Nothing happened. Not yet. That's the frustrating part for anyone who wants an ending. There's no confrontation, no reveal, no police knocking down a door. Just a woman living in a house with a man whose kindness started to feel like staging, and a post on the internet that sits there like a time capsule. Some nights I think maybe I was wrong. Maybe he's just awkward. Maybe he really is worried. Maybe this is all anxiety and pattern seeking and fear. Then I remember the calm. The way he would say the same phrases in front of the same people. The way he would frame me gently, repeatedly, into a version of myself that wasn't true. And I remember why I posted it. Because if I'm not here anymore, I don't want anyone to tell a story about me that I didn't write first. I don't want people to say, we never saw it coming. I want them to see the pattern. I want them to see the preparation. And I want them to know where to look. The moment I almost died, the first thing I noticed wasn't fear. It was her voice, calm, encouraging, certain. Just keep going, she said. You're almost there. That's what sticks with me now, because nothing about that moment felt like almost there. The trip was her idea. Things had been off between us for months. Not fights, not shouting, just distance. The kind that fills rooms without making noise. She said we needed a reset, time away, something just for us. She picked the place. She booked it. She planned everything down to the routes and activities. I remember thinking how nice it was not to decide anything for once. I wanted it to work. That mattered more than I realised at the time. The first warning came early. We were hiking the second morning. A trail she'd insisted on. Scenic, she said. Quiet. The map at the trailhead showed multiple paths, and one was clearly marked more difficult. I pointed to it. That's not the one, right? She smiled. That's the fun one. There was a sign, weather warnings, a note about conditions changing fast. I hesitated. She touched my arm and said, "We'll be fine. You worry too much." So I went. The trail narrowed quicker than I expected. The ground dropped off on one side. Loose rock. No guardrail. No clear markers anymore. I slowed. "Maybe we should turn back," I said. She didn't stop walking. "Just a little farther," she said. "It opens up." That phrase came up a lot on that trip. Just a little farther. When it happened fast. A misstep. Gravel giving way. My foot sliding where it shouldn't have. I caught myself barely. Fingers scraping rock. My heart slamming into my ribs like it wanted out. Below me was nothing but air and distance. I remember shouting her name. She turned slowly, looked at me hanging there, and she didn't scream. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She tilted her head slightly and said, "You're okay, just pull yourself up." Her voice was steady, almost instructional. I was shaking so hard my arms felt like they might give out. "I can't," I said. "I need help." She took a step closer, then stopped. "Use your right foot," she said. "There's a ledge." There wasn't. Not where she said there was. I don't know how I got back up. Adrenaline. Luck. Something else. I collapsed onto the trail, gasping, hands bleeding, legs weak. She crouched beside me and brushed dirt from my sleeve, like nothing had happened. "See," she said. "You're fine." I laughed then, that weird laugh people do when they're trying to convince themselves something didn't just almost end them. The rest of the trip blurred after that. But once I was home, safe, stationary, able to think, the pieces started lining up in ways I didn't like. The boat she'd encouraged me to take out alone, even though the rental guy hesitated. The direction she insisted were right, even when the road narrowed and the signs disappeared. every risky moment. Every time I'd paused, every time she'd pushed, always calm, always reassuring, always just enough confidence to override my doubts. I replayed the hike in my head more times than I can count. Not the slip, her reaction, because if it had been an accident, real fear would have shown up somewhere. Later I asked her about it. Not accusing, just curious. "Did that scare you?" I said. She thought for a second, then shrugged. "I knew you'd be okay." That answer sat wrong, because she didn't say she hoped I'd be okay. She said she knew. I don't have proof. I've never said that part out loud. But here's what I can't shake. If I had fallen, if I hadn't caught myself, it would have been a tragic accident on a couple's getaway. Wrong trail, bad luck. People shake their heads and say, "So sad." No one would have asked why she kept encouraging me forward. No one would have questioned how calm she was afterward. I didn't confront her. I didn't accuse her. I just stopped letting her lead me into risk, stopped following without checking, stopped trusting the voice that kept saying, "Just a little farther." Because some people don't push you, they guide you, and if it works, it never looks intentional. I didn't wake up thinking I was going to die. That's the part that still messes with me. It was a normal morning. Coffee half finished, shoes by the door. My wife moving around the kitchen in that quiet, efficient way she had. No tension, no argument, nothing sharp in the air. I got in the car and pulled out of the driveway like I'd done 1,000 times. I didn't even make it to the end of the block. I pressed the brake and nothing happened. No resistance, no slowing, just the pedal going soft under my foot, like it had decided not to be part of the system anymore. The world narrowed fast, a parked car rushing up, a mailbox, a tree. I remember thinking very clearly, this is how it happens. Then the impact, metal folding, glass bursting. My body doing what bodies do when physics takes over. When I came to, I was still alive. That surprised me. The hospital lights were too bright. Everything smelled clean and wrong. Someone was asking me questions I couldn't answer yet. And then my wife was there. She sat beside the bed, took my hand. Her grip was steady, not shaking, not tight. She said, "You scared me." Her voice didn't crack. She didn't cry. She didn't ask what happened. She just kept saying calmly, "You're okay now. You're okay." I remember thinking that was strange. Not bad, not suspicious. Just strange. Because when something almost kills someone you love, people usually fall apart first and collect themselves later. She seemed collected already. The doctors said it was a freak accident. Brake failure. Rare, but not impossible. They told me how lucky I was. My wife nodded at all the right moments. She asked practical questions. Insurance, recovery time, physical therapy. She knew the answers before they had finished asking. At home, while I healed, she took over everything. Medication schedules, appointments, meals, phone calls. She was attentive, gentle, almost soothing, and that's when the thought crept in. Not all at once, just a whisper. "She's very calm." I pushed it away. People react differently. Shock shows up in strange forms. Calm can be a defense. I wanted that to be true. Then I noticed small things. Things you only notice when you're stuck sitting still, watching your own life from the couch. The brake receipt from the shop was gone. She said she'd thrown it out. The mechanic I usually use said he didn't remember the work being done when I called to ask questions. She explained that too. Said she must have gone somewhere else. There was a bottle of medication on the counter I didn't recognise. She said the doctor added it, the doctor hadn't. Each thing had an explanation, and every explanation made sense on its own. That's the problem with this kind of fear. Nothing ever screams, it whispers. One afternoon, while she was out getting groceries, I went to the garage. I hadn't planned to, I just wandered. I looked at the car, still crumpled and waiting to be hauled away. I'm not a mechanic, I don't pretend to be, but I could see where something had been loosened, not broken, not snapped, loosened, like someone wanted it to fail while I was moving. Not immediately, not predictably, just eventually. I sat down on the garage floor and felt my chest tighten, because accidents don't usually come with patience. That night she brought me dinner and sat across from me, watching to make sure I ate. She smiled and said, "You need your strength." I watched her hands, steady, precise, the hands of someone who wasn't improvising. Later, in bed, she wrapped an arm around me and rested her head on my shoulder. Her breathing slowed before mine did, and I lay there awake, staring into the dark, replaying the last few months, the distance, the quiet resentment, the insurance paperwork she'd handled without mentioning it. The way she'd once said, half joking, "I don't know how much longer I can do this." I understood then what made this thought so terrifying. Not that she might have tried to kill me, but that if she had, she'd done it in a way that left no fingerprints, no scene, no moment of rage, just planning, just waiting, just comfort afterward. I never confronted her. What would I even say? "I think you tried to kill me" isn't an accusation. It's a sentence that erases your life either way. Because if I was wrong, I'd destroyed everything. And if I was right, then I was living with someone who knew I was onto her. So I stayed quiet. I healed. I watched. I started handling my own medications. I double-checked everything. I learned where all the important documents were, and I stopped sleeping deeply. She still touches my arm when she walks past, still asks how I'm feeling, still tells people how close she came to losing me, and sometimes when she says it, I see something behind her eyes. Not grief, not relief, calculation, like someone adjusting a plan that didn't quite work the first time. I'm still alive. That's the part everyone focuses on. But surviving once doesn't make you safe. It just means someone knows what went wrong. And now, I don't think she'll rush it again. That's what scares me most. I woke up alive. That sounds like a normal sentence until you understand how close it was. The doctor told me later, calm and clinical, that if I'd been in that house another hour, maybe less, I wouldn't have woken up at all. They said it the way people say the weather. "You're lucky." They said carbon monoxide, like it was just another word for bad timing. I remember staring at the ceiling tiles in the hospital, trying to make my mind hold on to one thought at a time. My head felt split open from the inside. My throat burned. My body was heavy, like I'd been underwater, and my husband was sitting in the chair beside my bed, perfectly calm, not pale, not shaken, not teary. He looked prepared. When the nurse asked what happened, he answered before I could. "Faulty heater," he said. "Must have been leaking overnight." He said it smoothly, like he'd practiced it in the car on the way over. The nurse nodded, wrote something down and moved on. I watched his face while he spoke. No tremor in his hands, no strain in his voice, just concern arranged neatly in the right places. And I remember thinking, even through the fog in my head, "Why aren't you falling apart?" The day before, I told him I didn't feel right. It started small, a headache that didn't match the day, pressure behind my eyes, a nausea that came and went like a tide. I blamed water, I blamed stress, I blamed the weather. By evening it was worse. The kind of headache that makes you impatient with the world. The kind that makes lights feel too bright and conversation feel like work. I told him, I feel strange. He glanced up from his phone and said, You're probably just tired. I remember the tone, gentle, dismissive, final. I tried to laugh it off, but later when I stood up from the couch, the room tilted slightly. My knees went weak for a second, like the floor had moved. I sat back down fast. He noticed. He looked right at me, and then he said calmly, You're scaring yourself. That sentence sat wrong, not because it was cruel, because it was useful. It made my body feel like the problem, not whatever was happening around me. I told him again, I don't feel good. He stood up, walked over, put his hand on my forehead. You're not hot, he said. Drink some water, sleep, you'll feel better. I wanted to believe him. That's the thing. When you've built a life with someone, you want their calm to mean safety. So I went to bed. The last clear memory I have from that house is waking up in the middle of the night and not understanding where I was. That sounds impossible until it happens. I remember opening my eyes and seeing the familiar shapes of my room, but they didn't connect to meaning, like I was looking at someone else's life. My mouth was dry, my heart felt like it was beating through mud. I tried to sit up and couldn't do it right the first time. It took effort, like my body didn't belong to me. I whispered his name. He rolled over, half asleep. What? He mumbled. I don't feel right, I said. I remember the words coming out slow. He sighed. Not annoyed exactly, just tired. Go back to sleep, he said. It's probably a migraine. Migraine, a label, a box, a reason not to act. I lay back down because my head was pounding and I couldn't fight for myself anymore. That's the last thing I remember, until light. They told me later that carbon monoxide can make you confused before it makes you unconscious, that it can feel like the flu, like exhaustion, like anxiety. That's what makes it effective. It doesn't announce itself, it convinces you to stay still. I woke up to voices, pressure on my chest, cold air on my face. At first I thought I was dreaming. Then I saw strangers in my bedroom, men in uniforms, flashing lights reflecting off the hallway wall. One of them kept saying, "Stay with me." I couldn't answer. I couldn't even be embarrassed. I was beyond that. I remember turning my eyes toward the doorway and seeing my husband standing there, watching. Not frantic, not rushing, just watching. An EMT asked him, "How long has she been like this?" My husband said, "I just found her." Just found her. Like he hadn't been in the bed beside me. Like he hadn't heard me whisper. Like he hadn't told me to go back to sleep. They carried me out. The cold outside hit me, and I remember thinking faintly, so this is what leaving feels like. In the hospital, once my head cleared enough to hold a thought, the question started landing. The doctor asked me what symptoms I'd had. When I started to answer, my husband interrupted. "She's been stressed," he said. "Not sleeping. She thought she was getting sick." He said it like he was helping, like he was giving context, but the way he said it felt like he was building a frame around me. Stressed, not sleeping, thought she was getting sick. A story that explained why I didn't call for help. A story that explained why he didn't either. I watched the doctor's face. He accepted it, wrote it down. That's when I realised something I didn't want to realise. If this had worked, if I had died, the story was already ready. Tragic accident. Faulty heater. She'd been tired. She didn't feel well. She went to bed. And my husband would have been the grieving man in the chair. The devoted husband who did everything he could. When we got home, the house felt different. Same walls, same furniture, but the air felt like an enemy. The fire department had been there, tagged the heater, ventilated the place, said it was dangerous. My husband kept repeating the phrase, bad luck. He said it to neighbours, to family, to the insurance guy. Just bad luck, he'd say, shaking his head. Same words, same rhythm, like a line he'd decided to stick to. I was still weak, my body still felt wrong, my thoughts came slower than usual. And that's when I used his laptop, not to snoop, to pay a bill. That's the honest truth. The bill had come to his email and my phone was dead, and I didn't want to ask him for help because I'd started feeling cautious. I opened the browser, and there it was, a search history page that made my stomach go cold in one clean drop. Not one search, several, spread over weeks. I read them slowly, like my eyes were refusing to accept words that could change my life. How long does it take carbon monoxide to kill you? Carbon monoxide symptoms look like flu. Time to unconsciousness, carbon monoxide. Can carbon monoxide death look natural? I stared at the dates. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, a month ago, before the accident, before I'd ever complained about a headache, before the heater failed. My fingers went numb on the trackpad. I sat there at the kitchen table and felt something settle inside me that I still can't name cleanly. It wasn't panic, it wasn't even shock, it was clarity, cold, quiet, complete. Because there's only one reason you research timelines like that. You don't Google that because you're curious. You Google that because you're planning. I didn't confront him. That's what people always ask when I tell this. Did you ask him about it? No, because asking would have changed the air between us. Asking would have told him I knew. And if he was capable of planning a death that looked like bad luck, then he was capable of adjusting once his plan was threatened. So I did what I could do. I started acting normal. I smiled when he spoke. I let him think I believed the story. And quietly, I did the things he hadn't planned for. I told one person, just one, someone I trusted, someone who wouldn't dismiss me as paranoid. I took pictures of the search history. I saved them in a place he couldn't access. I wrote down dates and details, and I stopped letting him be the one who decided what felt right for my body. If I had a headache, I left the house. If I felt tired, I called someone. If I didn't feel safe, I didn't argue with myself about whether I was being dramatic. Because that's the trick of it. If it had worked, it would have looked like a heater. If it had worked, people would have said, "What a tragedy." If it had worked, he would have stood at my funeral and accepted sympathy with the same calm face he wore in my hospital room. And no one would have ever thought to ask the simplest question. Why did he know the timeline before it happened? I'm alive. That's the part everyone wants to hold on to. But being alive isn't the same as being safe. And once you've seen something like that in black and white on a screen, you can't go back to trusting the air you breathe around someone who might be counting the hours. I need to say this first. This isn't my story. A woman I know told it to me over a long afternoon, piece by piece, correcting herself when memory slipped, stopping when certain details still hurt. I'm going to tell it through her eyes, the way she lived it, because that's how she needed it carried. I didn't find out my husband was leaving me all at once. I found out he was practicing. The first place I noticed it was the car. Not something dramatic, just a map folded too neatly in the passenger door. Printed directions, not GPS. Routes highlighted in pen. Back roads. Turns that avoided cameras I recognised. I told myself it was for work. He travelled sometimes. People print directions when they don't trust their phone. But the map wasn't creased like it had been used once. It was worn, handled, refolded, like muscle memory. The second thing was the cash. Small withdrawals, always the same amount, always from the same ATM. Not enough to trigger alarms, enough to build something quietly. When I asked, he smiled and said, "Just like having someone me." That answer used to satisfy me. It didn't anymore. I found the phone by accident. A burner, tucked inside a shoebox at the back of a closet he never used. Dead battery, no contacts saved, no photos. Just a device that existed for a life I wasn't part of. I sat on the floor with it in my hands and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not panic, not grief, recognition. This wasn't a fantasy. This was logistics. I didn't confront him. I started watching. I watched the timing of his errands. The way he left early on the same day each week. The way he took a route that didn't make sense unless you were trying to be unseen. I followed him once, far enough back that I could still tell myself I was wrong. He drove to a part of town we never went to. Parked, walked, didn't rush. The place was a cheap motel tucked behind a gas station, the kind with exterior doors and no questions. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. I saw the routine in his movements, the confidence, the way he checked nothing twice because he already knew the answers. Later, when I checked our bank statements, I found the storage unit, paid monthly, small, out of the way. Inside were clothes I'd never seen him wear, generic, unmemorable, a different version of him, packed neatly and ready. That was the moment it clicked. He wasn't planning to leave me. He was rehearsing leaving us, testing the timing, the route, the feeling of being gone, practicing the weight of disappearance. I stopped sleeping. I started noticing the details that hurt the most. How careful he still was with me, how normal he acted, how he kissed my forehead before bed, like always. He was already gone in his head. He was just waiting for the day it felt easy. The day he followed the plan without needing to come back. I recognised it because I'd seen it enough times. The route, the cash, the calm. The morning he finally did it, nothing was different. No argument, no goodbye. He kissed me, said he'd be late, and walked out with the same bag he always used. I waited. Then I followed the pattern. Same ATM, same withdrawal, same back roads, same motel. I parked across the street and watched him disappear inside. I didn't follow him. I didn't confront him. I went home. By the time I checked the accounts, they were already closed. The storage unit was empty. The phone number disconnected. No note, no explanation. Just a clean execution of something he'd practiced while sleeping next to me. The part people don't understand when I tell them this, when I tell you this, is that the worst betrayal wasn't that he left. It was that he stayed. Stayed long enough to make sure it would work. Stayed long enough to perfect being gone. He didn't vanish impulsively. He left like someone who had already walked away a dozen times before. And the thing I can't shake even now is this. Every rehearsal was a choice. Every practice run was a day he came home to me anyway. Which means he didn't just leave once. He left me over and over. And only stopped coming back when he was sure he wouldn't need to.